Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Music Rewind, a podcast where we look to tell the stories behind our favorite albums. I'm your host, Steve Epley, and in each episode I will invite a guest on to tell us about their favorite music album, how they discovered it, and what makes it special to them. Hey listeners, anyone out there that knows me knows that if there is one thing I can have while listening to a great album, it's a fantastic cigar. These days, if I'm recording, editing, or researching for this show, you will likely find me with a fine cigar from Gotham Cigars. Gotham Cigars has a massive selection of premium cigars online, all available right now through the link in the show notes. Bundle deals, buy one get one, and weekly specials up to 40% off all help you get the best cigars at the best price. Please use the link in the show notes to help Music Rewind continue on talking great music. Joining me today is another returning guest on Music Rewind, Michael Boroski. You will remember Mike from our Season 1 episode talking Pearl Jam's Verses and also our 3-part 90s music roundtable. Mike is the music nerd that is the keeper of all the music spreadsheets. Welcome back, Mike, and thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, Steve. Happy to be back, man. This is, I feel like been on this journey since the beginning, and I just keep following. I'm looking forward to Season 3. I got so many more records to talk about.
Yeah, you've been with us since the beginning, so it's you're a perennial part of the show here.
Hashtag friend of the pod.
Well, Mike, let's get right on into it. What album would you like to bring to the table, and why is it special to you?
Well, Steve, this time I'm going to go back to a little classic rock mainstay, Led Zeppelin, but I'm going with their third record, which is amply titled 3. I chose this one because honestly, it's like the bridge from the super kind of heavy metal, sludgy type stuff from like 1969 from like 1 and 2 to Led Zeppelin IV, the Zozo record, or however you want to call it, where they're trying a lot of different things here, and honestly, and another reason it's my favorite record is Tangerine is one of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs, like, of all time. And I know it's kind of surprising because most people are like, oh, I love Stairway or Immigrant Song. I mean, there's even off of this record alone, but there's something about that intro of the guitar.
Yeah, that faux intro that starts it and then it restarts.
Yeah, and then they play it again, and Jimmy Page wrote this when he was still in the Yardbirds. So this song is, I think, like 3 or 4 years old at the time when he brings it to the band. But yeah, so pretty pumped. Let's rock and roll. Even though that's not on this record.
Well, so how did you discover Led Zeppelin III? Or Led Zeppelin in general?
Well, Led Zeppelin was definitely a band that was in the house. I remember my dad had the Led Zeppelin box set on cassette that had the field that was like the UFO thing, and then a Zeppelin coming over the cross of it. And it was kind of just like almost like a greatest hits, but it was four cassettes, and they just mixed it up. And so I never really heard it. But again, I was listening to this at like 9 years old when I was delivering the Bureau County Republican around town. So I don't know how many 9-year-olds besides like kids from the 70s or, or even like mid 80s would be rocking out to a song, some of these songs that are, at this time might be 20 some years old. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was definitely something my dad, had in the house. And I found out recently that apparently I'm a bigger Led Zeppelin fan than he was, because he told me after the first 4 or 5 records that they didn't make good music anymore, and it was a waste of time to listen to anything past that. So I was kind of surprised. I was like, you're the whole reason I listened to Led Zeppelin. And I got into them. Like, this is one of my favorite bands of all time. Like, they replaced the Beatles once I got into them, because I just loved the power of all of them, like all four of them, like just the power that comes from all of them. I mean, I just got done reading Beast, and it's autobiography about her. Sorry, autobiography would be tough if he had an autobiography out.
True.
Yeah.
John Bonham, right?
Yeah, John Bonham. And it's John Bonham's, biography the foreword was by Dave Grohl. So that's what kind of caught my attention. And just Bonham's drumming, like on anything, was just amazing. John Paul Jones, which I actually saw play with them Crooked Vultures, that was Dave Grohl's the drummer in that band.
Oh, that's cool.
And then the guy from Queens of the Stone Age is a singer. And just to see John Paul Jones like play an instrument, like was, I mean, I've never seen Jimmy Page, which I would love to, just to see him play guitar. If they get him out of his crypt, or he's done with that deal with the devil or whatever he has. And then Robert Plant, like he's so in the 70s, man. I mean, I'm a straight man, but Robert Plant in the 70s, whew, that is a good looking man right there.
Yeah, to see those guys live in the 70s, especially the early 70s in their prime, would have been fantastic.
Oh,
I'm jealous of anyone that got to see it.
That I would rather see them than in the 70s in their prime than like the Beatles in their prime, or Nirvana in their prime, or like even Metallica, like any of these bands, because I think Zeppelin, they were the first like arena rock band that could sell out like places like the United Center, and their manager would get like 25% of the money up front. And nobody, like, there's all these things that he would do to get all this money on promotions, and they would just tour nonstop. Yeah,
I was researching them a little as far as their origins today, and their first record deal as Led Zeppelin, even before I think it might have been still Lead Balloon they were not decided yet, but they actually got, in today's money, would have been over $1 million advance. And the record company hadn't even heard them play yet. It was all through their reputation and Dusty Springfield. Dusty Springfield was, I guess she was a friend of John Paul Jones, and her influence to the record company was just do it. You won't regret it. Just do it.
Yeah, John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page were like big session guys. So a lot of people knew John Paul Jones because he could come in and he was always reliable with the bass or the organ or mandolin. Guy played like 10 different instruments. And then, Jimmy Page somehow ended up, he joined the Yardbirds last, but somehow ended up owning the name the Yardbirds.
Yeah, you could say that.
I don't know how he did it, but when he was putting together the band, they were originally going to be called like the New Yardbirds, and they actually did, I think, a couple shows under that moniker, like when they first started playing. And then I believe it was either Keith Moon or Pete Townsend, and they were telling them about the band, and they're like, "Well, that will go over like a lead balloon."
Yeah,
and then that's kind of like how they came. And then they spelled Zeppelin just LED instead of LEAD. It's clever rock star stuff. Yeah,
and it becomes just iconic as far as the name itself, how it's spelled. I mean, the logo on your shirt right now. I mean, just that's it's one of those iconic just band names.
Yeah, it's like for years I always misspell the Beatles. Or like if it's a beetle, a bug, like I'm like, I know it's right. That's BATLES. And like Led Zeppelin's like the word lead, right, is LED for if I and I'm thinking, no, it's these guys, the way that they change the names. I don't think Korn's spelled with a K though. So I think we're okay there.
So how did you zero in on Led Zeppelin III as your favorite? Because obviously 2 and 4 are very popular, fantastic albums. Their whole catalog is great, with a few lower exceptions. But 2, 3, 4, I mean, that's a hell of a stride.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the first 5 records are. I mean, the first 6, 7. Honestly, all of them except Coda, because Coda was just a bunch of stuff that they threw together.
Presence doesn't really hit with me.
Presence has got isn't that Achilles' Last Stand though? Or am I thinking of In Through the Outdoor? Because
I like In Through the Outdoor.
Yeah, because I think that's got to be Achilles' Last Stand because that's a fantastic. I mean, an amazing song. But yeah, Led Zeppelin III. I just loved when I would randomly hear the songs on the tapes from my dad. I always loved to hear them good acoustic and really see not see but hear how Jimmy Page could play that and could hear that how but honestly beautiful how those guys played. And one of the songs, I think it's I want to say it's That's the Way or Celebration Day that Bonham actually plays with spoons because to make it to how soft he can play. And people are always saying he's so loud, but he's such a technically perfect jazz drummer that he could play that way and it sounded like he was louder than he really was. And he's the one who made the, drummers important. I mean, I know Ginger Baker and Keith Moon were there, but Bonham was a guy who's he wanted to be yeah, I know there's two soloists in this band, me and Jimmy. I am the band, And so when he was on stage and sober, he was cocky, but he was a fun guy and he was a good guy. But he also, he was a pretty mean drunk, and he didn't like to travel away from his family. So that was a big thing. That's why it's one of the reasons he partied so hard. But I think that, and just how light Bonham could play on this, and then just how the melodies and how beautiful a rock band could sound, without just for the most part just kind of being a guitar and some orchestral stuff, but not like the Beatles, not having George Martin there, putting the whole thing together. It's John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page putting all that music together.
They were the producers on this, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar as far as my discovery of the album. You remember the Page and Plant Unplugged back in the day?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unleaded, wasn't it?
Is that what it was called? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Unleaded.
But they played Gallows Pole on there. And that I had never heard before. I was well familiar with all the other hits from them and Led Zeppelin IV and all that from at that point, but I'd never heard Gallows Pole. This was fantastic, and that's when I started reading and was this a one off for the show? I didn't know, and then that led me to this album to where I finally was able to buy it because I couldn't find it anywhere at the time. Musicland didn't really have the full catalog there.
It's not one of their big, it's if you're always going to find it, it's going to be 1, 2, 4 and Houses of the Holy.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, Physical Graffiti will be there. And then this is the seventh record. If people think about
I didn't find the full album to own until I was actually in the military by that point. So
wow.
Illinois Valley. They just didn't have Led Zeppelin.
I think that was a BMG purchase for me.
Yeah. So that was where I finally, bought it, listened to the whole thing, loved it. Several takeaway tracks for me. But and then shortly after that, Almost Famous came out. And It worked out perfectly for me that I had committed the album to memory, loved the whole thing. And then that movie features, I think, 2 of the songs, or 3 maybe. But it was it just fit perfectly in my life as far as that album, then that movie, in sync for it.
Honestly, just an amazing movie. And what's so awesome about that movie is, that's the band Sweetwater is that's Led Zeppelin. I mean, the first time he went on a tour for a rock band, when he was 15 years old, they sent him with Led Zeppelin.
So I think it's a mixture of Led Zeppelin, the Eagles, and Allman Brothers.
Yeah, well,
or at least the specific characters are taken from each.
Right. There's that part in Almost Famous where they have their arms around each other and they're singing that song. and then they're like, hey, enemy. Well, Cameron Crowe, like Pearl Jam was actually they did that to him because they called him the enemy, and they're like, hey, come here, and like they did that with him. So like he added some really cool things in that. And then, I mean, I loved Almost Famous because that to me was, I felt like the closest you're going to get to, like, I don't know, like Zeppelin. And I know Zeppelin's like in the movie, you know, and I think Bowie's in there too, you know. But like Zeppelin, there's just something about like this mystique, I think, about like this record to me. Like, think about, like, honestly, like Immigrant Song. Like, my wife said tonight, I didn't even think about it. I totally forgot it was in Shrek movie, the third movie.
Yeah. When
and that was
princesses storm the castle kind of thing.
Yeah. I was like, that was not even the one I was thinking of. I was thinking of Jack Black and School of Rock. Yeah.
Well, he had to, I think it was a DVD extra where he actually did a video essay and sent it to Led Zeppelin to say, please let me use.
Because they couldn't afford it. Because they are super expensive to have. Like, and then that I also think of, and I can't remember what Marvel movie it was, that Thor gets the hammer back. Yeah. And is it Ragnarok?
Yeah.
And like right when he says hammer of the god, and I knew the song was going to play. Like in the whole movie, I'm like, I would be shocked if they don't play Immigrant Song. Like, you know, and then you read the lyrics and you're like, holy, it really is about, you know, Vikings coming to rape and pillage, you know, England. Crazy, like, because it feels like that big momentous thing, like that song, because the way they kick it out.
Well, to get into the tracks of the album, that's obviously track one, Immigrant Song. Apparently they wrote that as in a fun, arrogant style, that like they were the Vikings pillaging.
Yeah, and then Valhalla, I'm Coming was a whole thing too. That one might have to be edited out for the kids, but yeah, I read that part. I think I read that. Like, I think when we first talked about doing this, I read that and I was like, "This is amazing!" Like it's so ridiculous. But that to me, that Immigrant Song is obviously I think the song that everybody knows off this record. You know, like the top.
I'd like to think that these guys were savvy enough and sarcastic in their minds enough to know that. So Led Zeppelin 1 and 2, big rockin' albums. And that's what everyone knew them for. So we're going to make track one our biggest rocker off this album.
Right.
Lure you in, and then, all right, now it's time for something different.
That's like the High Fidelity, how to make a mixtape.
Yeah,
you got to come out
swinging,
hot one. Come out swinging, and I mean this is one of the biggest swingers, you know, that they have, really, because it's in all their live sets. After this moment, like it's one of the biggest ones they play, and then they have
Immigrant Song would fit fine on Led Zeppelin 2. You know, it would fit right in there.
Yeah, and I think it was one of the first ones they wrote off this. And then a lot of the acoustic stuff, because they went to Branyuar place in Wales. I never know how to say it.
Branyuar.
Yeah, I'm not. If it's anything close to sounding French, I'm like Ricky Bobby. Like, you talk like you got a dog peanut butter's mouth.
Wait, I got it right here. It's a cottage in Wales. It stood at the end of a narrow road just outside the small market town of Machagilachmi in Gwynedd.
Yeah.
And I apologize to everyone in Wales for butchering those names.
We're so sorry. That was the only part of the UK I didn't get to when my wife and I went to the UK back in 2018. Wales was the only part we didn't get to.
My ignorant ass, I didn't realize that in Wales they kind of have their own language that dates back centuries until I watched The Crown. Then I'll be damned. I did not know that.
But Immigrant Song definitely, like, it is my number 2 like favorite song off that record. It might be one of my at least top 10 Zeppelin songs. Just and that one will always be on FM radio on a classic rock station until the world implodes. Yeah.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one they pick out, and if they pick a slower one, that's always going to be Gallows Pole. I mean, that's the first song of side 2, but we can go back to Friends if you want.
Well, walk me through how you listen to it. I mean, do you go straight through or do you bounce around?
Well, it's funny. I've been listening to the last, couple weeks or so off and on. I just listen to it straight through, but usually what I do, if it was a CD or even the vinyl is kind of hard to do it on, but I listen to Tangerine first and then I go back and listen to it. And then after Branyar's Stomp, I stop it because I know this is one of my favorite records ever, but man, I've never liked Hats Off to Roy Harper ever. He was a great bull. I mean, Ron Harper, just joking, but
I actually have in here. It's not my favorite on the album. It's tough to listen to for a minute or so.
It's the reverb in his vocals that I just can't stand.
Yeah, it's a bit jarring.
Yeah, especially after all that acoustic songs.
Right.
And it's almost like a siren. Like, and you're like, what the hell just happened to this record? You made it 9 songs through, and you put this on instead of "Hey, what can I do?" which was the B-side of the single, and
that would have been nice on this album. Yeah,
it was written during this time, and and that is a classic rock staple too. Yeah. Like, how's that song not on here? And then that, come on, Jimmy, that's where you messed up, Jimmy Page. You paid all those producer bucks.
Yeah, they could have put Hey Anywhere on this album and then ended with Bron Rar Stomp. That would have been a good close. Yeah.
And that's what sucks is, like, every time I get whenever that song's done, I see it start to tick over to nothing. I'm like, all right, and I'll start back up at Immigrant Song. Like, because I'd rather not. And it sucks when you listen to it on vinyl, because like you're sitting there and by the time you get up, it's already halfway through that song anyways. So
it's not long.
I might as well wait. No, it's not, but it's just, it's one of the most frustrating Led Zeppelin songs ever, I think, for me. Because it's like this album's perfection, because it has the softness that everybody kind of loves about Led Zeppelin IV. Because, I mean, there's big rockers on Led Zeppelin IV, but obviously Stairway's on there. And you know how Stairway starts. And, there's a lot of that slowness in this that, like, you can see that it's going to build to Led Zeppelin IV. And then you still have, like, Immigrant Song and Out on the Tiles. And, like, Since I've Been Loving You, like, when it starts to get towards the end of it, there's just – and there's no real, like – crazy rocker on here.
And I don't want to always bring everything back to Pink Floyd, but just like you don't have Dark Side of the Moon without metal.
No,
you don't have Led Zeppelin IV without their progression through Led Zeppelin III.
No, because 1 and 2, I mean, there's like, I think on those first 2 records, there's like 2 or 3 like slower songs on there that aren't, it's not
like Communication Breakdown and Days of Confusion. Yeah, I mean, there's.
Yeah, but there's a couple slower ones, but this one was so different, and it got blasted by, the music writers never really cared for Zeppelin anyways, and then this one was just like, see, I told you, these guys suck, and I mean, it still went platinum and all that stuff, and then when they played them live, people were like, well, this is like way better, and they went back, and then Zeppelin 4 came out, and people were like, oh, I see what they're trying to do. And they would go back and buy 3, which that's happened a couple times with them. And I think that was Houses of the Holy people didn't really dig after 4. And then Physical Graffiti came out and they're like, oh, okay, I see what they're trying to do. And then they went back and bought a bunch of Houses of the Holy. It was really weird how their sales went for the a handful of records.
Yeah, you mentioned "Since I've Been Loving You," and that's one of my favorite blues songs of all time.
Right.
There's several different versions out there. The actual studio version, great. All the live versions are fantastic. It's just, and they're all different in their own right, but they all just, I don't know, they're just fantastic. One of the great blues rock songs of all time.
Yeah, to quote Dan Prokop, it's fantastic.
Shout out to Danny.
Yeah, edit that one out, but you can play that for him later. Oh yeah, I mean, obviously, like if Elvis stole rock and roll from, these guys, blatant blues rip-offs. I mean,
pillaged
from. The first, and they at least it gave, at least the first couple records actually like, all right, well, this was obviously a cover, and this, but Jimmy grew up with that like blues, and he just loved blues guitars, and him and Robert Johnson, I think they both sold their souls to the devil, but but yeah, that is just so bluesy, and and it's for like skinny ass white guys from the countryside in England that are making this noise, and it's just a song that, you feel like he definitely feels like he is missing out, like that he's, and I think a lot of it was the touring because they just was nonstop for these guys. But yeah, that's like the number 3 song. I even like ranked my songs because I was like, just because if I was thinking about like how I like this record, it's like Tangerine, Immigrant Song, Since I've Been Loving You, Celebration. Even though it's weird, it'd be weird to play Celebration without playing Friends because they
merge.
Made, and a Communication Breakdown, Live and Love, the one that they play back to back usually on FM stations. Like when you have it on shuffle or something and they don't. That song doesn't come up after it. You're like, it's like Sgt. Pepper's, and then not hearing.
It feels weird.
Helping My Friends right after, yeah. But I think like Friends and Celebration Day, like that's definitely, they have to be together, just because, and that's like, like you said, like Immigrant Song like came out and they're like, we're gonna rock, and then Friends comes on. And not like No One Told You It's Gonna be this way this day or whatever that song is.
Folksy, acoustic, Celtic song about friendship. Yeah. It'll definitely it's like, okay, hard left turn here.
And they did, and like really they don't start like rocking again until Out on the Tiles,
which is a John Bonham tune.
Yeah. Which that's one of the only ones that he wrote all the music for. And the Page wrote like the guitar riff.
Is that intro the same as Black Dog, or is it just very similar?
No, I think they would play it live together though. I think just because I think it might be close. I think he just did that part, and then he might have used the whole thing. But like I know he was basically like, I guess Bonham was getting antsy. They're out in the country, and he wanted to go get a quick pint. And the name's actually Out on the Tiles is what it's a slang
for going out to the bars,
hitting the bars, or it's like a dark pint was out on the tiles. But that's what something like Bonham would always sing this song. And Page was like, wow, he's driving me nuts. So he would like play the guitar riff for him. And then John just kind of went with it. I will say, I got an interesting story. Like when we're done talking about the songs, about what they did when they were recording this, they apparently there was a commercial back in like the 70s that Volkswagen, it said unsinkable, and it had a Volkswagen in like a lake or something, and it was floating. And so these guys were like, do you think that's real? And so John Bonham and John Paul Jones went into John Bonham's Volkswagen, because John Bonham's like, I got one. He goes, let's just take mine. I don't care. The guy bought like cars. Like one thing he loved more than drumming was like cars. The guy he'd buy like a new car all the time, and then just get rid of it or buy it, and just tons of money. There's like amazing stories about that in the book. And there he is, like, and for a little bit they drive right in, and for a little bit they're floating. And they're like, it's real. And then the two other guys that were with them, I think it was like a road manager or somebody else, saw that they started sinking. And like the water was coming up to the sides of the door, and they're going, shit, like this is half of the biggest band in the world. And they run in, and it was up to their waist so they could still get the guys out. And they open up the door, and there's John Bonham just laughing his ass off, thinking it's the funniest thing in the world. You're thinking, how many times this guy almost died? And then the way he dies is like so stupid. But that's the other thing. But I love that story. It was in the book, and I don't know if it's in any other Led Zeppelin books or if it's just in the Bonham book. But I just think it's amazing that they're like, yeah, let's go try it out. See if it works. I have so much money. Let's just, because you talked about Gallows. And I'm with you. Like, I kind of remember listening to it on those tapes that my dad had. But then I remember how excited I was when Robert Plant and Jimmy Page were going to play on MTV Unplugged. And I don't remember what year that was, because it was like 92 or something.
I want to say mid-90s. Like maybe it was in that. I mean, you had.
I don't think we were in high school yet, though. I think we were.
Yeah. Well, you had a stretch of years there where you had the Eagles on Unplugged. You had Eric Clapton Unplugged. You had Led Zeppelin do their thing. So, yeah, there was I think even Fleetwood Mac did one. So you had just all those classic rock bands coming back and reuniting-ish.
Right. And I just remember, because I was so pumped. Like, I was telling my dad, like, I go, do you know they're doing, like, Zeppelin's coming back and they're going to play? And I'm like, I don't know how they're going to do it. Like, joking. I'm like, didn't the guy die? Like, the drummer, isn't he dead? And my dad's like, well, obviously they're not going to, if they're going to have somebody else. And I just remember listening to that and going, man, it was so cool. And then I got pissed, though, because, like, where's John Paul Jones? Like, I mean, the guy wrote, like, half the music that's on this stuff. And I always thought, for years, I'm like, why doesn't just Jason Bonham just drum with them and just get over with it and just tour and, like, let's see it. And obviously Robert Plant is kind of the reason they don't, because he was like, this is my best friend, and I don't, they did a couple shows. They did that Celebration Day, and then I think they did Live Aid also.
Well, I can respect, though, them not doing that under the Led Zeppelin name. They Page and Plant.
Right, but if Jason Bonham and John Paul Jones are there, like, that to me is Led Zeppelin. Because what's really cool about that book is that he talks about Jason a lot, and how Jason at like 7, 8 years old, or probably even earlier, was drumming. And the one time, I think it was the last tour they were on, so it was like 77 in the US. And John Bonham was like, hey man, I'm just, to his kid, he's like, hey, go in there and do sound check with the guys. I'm going to go listen to it. And I think Jason was like 13.
Oh,
and And apparently it was like the guys didn't even know. And then all of a sudden they saw John in the corner, like clapping for him, listening to it. And they're like, wait, that wasn't you? Awesome. Like he's like that good of a drummer. And obviously he has his own stuff, but like the guy grew up in Led Zeppelin. And
what's he doing now?
From what the book said, he's got his own band, and he also plays on a lot of like people's records. And then his sister is a singer, John Bonham's sister, and she's got some stuff. And I think John Bonham's daughter Zoe is also a singer. So if you look him up on like iTunes and stuff, it's Zoe Bonham. And like I didn't listen to any of it, but I couldn't believe it. It was crazy. Just about John Bonham, which I knew this was going to happen. I'm just going to sit and talk about John Bonham the whole damn time. And I
perfectly fine.
Want to talk about how great these fucking songs are on this record. It's on my wall. I mean, I don't want to walk you all the way over to my living room. I'll be able to do it after the show. Because it's just like I have this thing that's like a wall of vinyl, and my top records are up there, along with a couple of my wife's. But like Zeppelin III's up there. I have the Zeppelin III record, and the big thing about that record, I guess, when it first came out, is that it was delayed 2.5 months because of the pinwheel thing that's in it.
Oh, for the cover with the different, so the cover can always change.
Yeah, it can always spin. That it took like two extra months it was delayed to try to do that. And I thought I always loved that. The artwork on that, I thought it was really cool, even on CD before I saw the vinyl. Because my dad did have it. I just never went in and dug it out. I don't think he did, because I actually had to. That was the only Led Zeppelin record I had to buy. I got every other Led Zeppelin record basically handed off to me except 3. I had to go buy it, and that's what I mean. It's like so. Most people don't think about this record as much because it's not like 4. Like 4, you could play the entire album on, any classic rock station in America, like all 9 songs on it, and people are like, "Oh, cool, they're playing a Led Zeppelin block," thinking it's like different albums and stuff.
My when I pillaged my dad's vinyl collection before I left Illinois, I asked, where's all the Zeppelin? Don't you have any? He's like, I had those on 8-track, and he just stares at me and until it hit me like,
yeah, because those are garbage.
Like,
worst 8-tracks are the worst. They disintegrate. I remember my dad had, and Steve, I think we were playing. I can't remember. My dad still had the station wagon, like the Griswolds. I think that might have been. He got rid of it right before he started youth football, but he used to have it for the first year of youth football, I think. And he had the 8-track player in there, and he would grab them, and they would just like, "Oh, let's do it," and be like, "Oh, I want to hear that song again." And he'd hit a couple buttons, and all of a sudden, and it would just explode. Like, while we didn't have seatbelts on and we're in the back, like it's amazing, like that we all didn't die several times over.
So, quick check of Jason Bonham. He's done several albums lately with Sammy Hagar and The Circle. Most recently, he is joining Kid Rock on his Bad Reputation tour.
Oh. No.
Sorry to burst that bubble for you, man.
Interview over. I'm out, man.
Okay,
come on, he's from England.
So no, it's
so is he so is the big Boris Johnson guy?
Okay, that was kind of a lead-in. Now that I click on the link, Foreigner, Grand Funk Railroad, and Jason Bonham's Led Zeppelin Evening announced as special guests for Kid Rock's tour. Sounds a little better.
Wait, so it's Kid Rock's tour?
Kid Rock is likely the headliner, but then also on the tour is Foreigner, Grand Funk Railroad, and Jason Bonham's Led Zeppelin Evening.
So those 3 bands who are classic rock staples. I mean, obviously Jason Bonham doesn't have his like big band, but I could legit name like maybe 2 or 3 Kid Rock songs. I could name like 3 or 4 Foreigner albums, and Oh my God, I'm going to be sick. Aaron Lewis is playing at the Psycho Silo in Sheffield.
Is it
Illinois.
the guy from Stained?
Yeah, he's a country and western singer now.
Is he really?
Yeah, the same guy who sang Mud Shovel and was a big like death metal guy or like, you know, a big hard rock guy is now just selling his soul to get all the super white trash country western singer listeners.
I'm sure that's got a short lifespan to it.
It's I would think so. It's $50 to go see him, and you know where Sheffield's at, don't you?
Yeah.
In Bureau County. $50 to go see a guy who I'm pretty sure won a Grammy with "It's Been a While." Like,
which was a good song at the time. You know, had your boy Fred Durst singing with him, right?
Well, no, come on now. That was from the Family Values tour. Do you remember that? It was that acoustic version. Yeah. And then he goes, Biloxi, this is the real. And I'm like, dude, this guy's like pouring his heart out. And you go out loud. Biloxi, this is a real motherfucking deal, y'all. It's like, could you imagine like if you're at like a Pearl Jam show and Eddie Vedder's singing Black, and I'm trying to think of like a dumb white rapper that would do something stupid like that. Like, I don't even know. Like, and then some idiot from the crowd coming out and going, "Yeah, Black, ooh, I love Black, like my girlfriend," and then you'd be like, "What the fuck?" Like, you'd be so pissed off, like, because you're like, "Hello, Springfield."
Yeah, you're right though. When you think back to that, "It's Been a While," that acoustic version, he does pour his heart out on that song. Yeah, that's actually a good version of that song.
That's outside. That's outside. That's the
yeah, because I'm on the outside looking. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that's when he says it. I was like, if you listen to the Family Values tour CD, which I had because I tried to rob BMG blind. BMG Columbia House, and I ran out of stuff to buy. Me and Danny just ran out of stuff. And all the rest of it's like, it's Korn, you know, and Limp Bizkit, and it's all heavy, and then Stain comes out.
Did it have that wonderful Korn song where him and Fred Durst do like a rap battle?
It might have been on there, yeah. And I think that was on there.
That's a gem.
I always laugh that they, like, the way they sequenced that is that they had Mud Shovel on, and then no, obviously the show was different, but Mud Shovel's on the CD, and then the next song's Outside. Now I'm like, first of all, I don't know who the hell is your set list guy, but like, let's not. You're really bringing the room down after like the one song that fucking rocks people out. But I can't believe I'm talking about Stain. I'm like, so excited this will be all edited out.
No, it will not. We will keep all this in.
We have a special bonus episode attached to this episode. It's the Mike's favorite bands from late 90s, early 2000s. Creed, Limp Bizkit, Korn. Fucking, oh, shit. Fucking Acoustic Creed, also known as Days of the New. The shelf in the room.
Start the band. So start to get paid with arms wide open.
So are there any tracks here that we have not discussed? We kind of bounced around the whole album.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Gallows Pole, and both of you and I were talking about.
It's easily my favorite.
Honestly, the part when I didn't know that woman was there, like in the Unplugged, and then like I didn't even see her, and then all of a sudden she sings that part, and I was like, holy shit, that is awesome. And they were really into they were starting to get into like Indian mysticism and all that stuff, like type sounding, And they really went on these trips, and obviously, because like a song like Kashmir and stuff, like they really got into that stuff. And that woman's voice, I just loved it. Like, I thought it was just so awesome. Like, because it was kind of like, I didn't know that she was standing there. It was one of those things, like if they I think even in the thing they pulled back that she was there, because originally they just showed him singing and then they pull back and show her. And I'm with you. It is
I love the story,
really great song.
personally, because for years I didn't really listen to the full lyrics to understand. I mean, they just sounded cool, so I'm humming along and singing little bits here and there with the song. And it wasn't until years later, looking at the lyrics, that you realize that, okay, yeah, this guy's trying to get out of being hung, right? Okay, sure. I didn't realize that the final verse is the hangman himself saying, thanks for the money, thanks for getting me laid, but I'm still killing you. That's great.
Yeah. That part I remember just listening to it as a kid. I'm like, wait a second. I'm like, did that guy take all his money and then still kill him after he banged his sister?
Yeah, it's like she warmed my soul. Now I'm going to laugh and pull so hard. See you on the gallows pole. That's great.
I think it's like an old Celtic, song or so, and they just rearranged it, and
it's based on an old poem called "The Maid Freed from the Gallows," which I'm going to assume that
because it does. You know what I mean? It sounds like it's all it's this song and the Johnny Cash song, 25 Minutes to Go. I always think of like the hangman's noose part, because like gallows pole, obviously the guy dies, and then the same thing in 25 Minutes to Go where I'm hoping I hear from the governor, I got 1 minute to go, and obviously we know what happens at the end of the song. But those two songs, I was just like the imagery that both those songs bring, because you can almost see a guy standing there in old English clothes, noose around his neck. And if it was The Life of Brian or something, it would probably be, you know what I mean? Something super funny. For some reason, I mix it together. Every time I hear that song, I think of stuff from The Life of Brian.
Always look on the bright side of life here.
Life's a piece of shit when you look at it. Life's a laugh and death's a joke, it's true. You'll see it's all a show. Keep 'em laughing as you go. Just remember that the last laugh is on you.
It just always been, I don't know why, and it shouldn't because it's a sad song, but you see those guys running up hey, good sir, hold on, we have this. The guy's all right, whatever you think you're going to give me. And he's like a creepy, almost like an Uncle Ernie type guy. Whatever, bring me your kids and all that stuff. And it's
that's weird. I got Uncle Ernie mentioned twice this season.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do know Quadrophenia is coming up, so it's not, it reminded me of The Who and Tommy, which if you ever have my brother on the show, I think my brother would probably do Tommy.
Absolutely.
Because it's his number one favorite band of all time. As long as he doesn't bring
Load or Reload, Tommy is off.
No, no, he would talk about The Who, Oasis, or AC/DC. Those would be his. And then That's the Way is just a great song, a great tune.
That's the way. Oh, that's the way it ought to be. Yeah. Mama said that's the way it ought to say.
Obviously, we talked about the Stomp and Roy Harper, but the songs that weren't on there, hey, what can I do? How is that not on this record? That is the one thing that has always bothered me about this album is flip that out, but they had like 16 songs, and then they put some stuff on Physical Graffiti and Coda, and then obviously you listen to the deluxe stuff. You can hear all that stuff. Some of them's like it's another blues song that they kind of covered, but like Brownie Yar,
I think you said it right.
is on Physical Graffiti, and it's all like it's like the acoustic version.
I love that one. Yeah, that's really a very pleasant listen.
Yeah, and this record to me is like it's one of those ones that you put on in the background and sit and have a beer like out on the deck, and it starts off hot. It's almost like you're grilling your food or something and getting all pumped up for the party, and then like a couple of these songs you just pick off and you play at the end of the night. Just some good. And Tangerine still hands down number one Led Zeppelin song of all time. It's something about how sad it is.
And we mentioned Almost Famous. It's the perfect song for that because the song itself is about a perfect woman in his mind that got away, which is Almost Famous.
Right.
It's just amazing how it's almost too on the nose, but the beautiful song.
Cameron Crowe's he is a hell of a writer. You know what I mean? Like he's if you've seen any of his movies and you've read anything that he's ever written, like he knows what he's doing. Like in like Singles, like he captured like what it was like to be in the early 90s in Seattle, and with Almost Famous, he captures what it's like to be growing up in the 70s. And this is like one of the dumbest things, like, and I don't know why I still think this. When I was a kid, I thought I was going to grow up and it would be like the 70s because of Led Zeppelin. And even before Almost Famous, like they like this album for some reason, these albums from Zeppelin, even this one for sure, but it's like transports you to like the 70s and like kind of like this easygoing, party at the Moon Tower type stuff that goes on. But I just always like thought we would be in the 70s for some reason when I got older, and then it became the 90s, and then we restarted a whole millennia, and it didn't work out so well on a lot of the music aspects of it.
We made some mistakes.
The music alone, there's been some great stuff, and honestly, I keep up with all this stuff I can, but there's something about Zeppelin that I can listen to Led Zeppelin at any time in my life, any place, and it like transports me to a place I've never been. Like I feel that way like with Floyd too. Like there's a more of a different like psychedelic thing with Floyd. Like you almost are like you're like in space when you listen to them. But like Zeppelin like brings you to like, being like out like in a park or something and having a beer with like these long hair hippies and just like relaxing and, smoking a J or whatever, and just enjoying like being alive and like enjoying like the sun and like the summer and like the Zepp. I don't know. There's something about the Zeppelin that does that when I hear them every time. And though I've never been to that place, I've never been to like San Francisco in like the late 60s or, all these places.
The closest I've gotten to seeing Led Zeppelin was my first Bonnaroo. There was a band called Les Zeppelin. L-E-Z.
Oh, yeah. The lesbian Zeppelin ladies.
Rocked. They were fantastic. And
they were in like music mags and stuff all the time.
Yeah, me and that was just me and my brother Tony at that particular Bonnaroo, and we made a point to go see them. They were great. Yeah, Get kicked ass.
Yeah. That I would love to see. I always get weird when people like cover Zeppelin, but I feel like I've only seen like a handful of people like cover bands like do Zeppelin, and I don't know if like, because Pearl Jam covers a lot of stuff, but usually their covers are like the Who or Neil Young. Like Zeppelin is kind of, it's not an easy band. I think to cover. A lot of times it has to be a woman, because there's something about Robert Plant, like the way he like does stuff. That, or like if Soundgarden ever wanted to do it, like back in the day, obviously.
Remember that band I sent you, the Main Squeeze, that covered "Have a Cigar"?
Mm-hmm.
They do a cover of "Since I've Been Loving You," and it's really good.
Yeah, no, that's
because that guy's got that high pitched kind of voice, and it fits.
Yeah, And that's the thing, is like there's nobody who's got a voice like Robert Plant except Chris Cornell. Like honestly, like Robert Plant and Chris Cornell's voices to me have always been real similar. Like Cornell, but like I'm talking about like their main range, not like when Cornell hits like Ritual, Birth Ritual or something, and he hits that super high note, or how growly he can be. But like they have this in between range, the way that these guys sing, like Chris Cornell can like sing that acoustic song the entire time, and so could Robert Plant. That like, and it doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like it's it sounds effortless, and it's just I don't know. I love, like, my number one singer of all time to me is Robert Plant. My favorite bass player of all time is John Paul Jones. My favorite drummer is John Bonham.
Well, you got me thinking now, as far as, you hear Beatles covers all the time. You hear Who covers. You hear plenty of covers of Floyd, Wish You Were Here and other things. But Zeppelin, you don't hear too many famous covers. And the first one, honestly, that pops to mind is the Immigrant Song, but it's by Galactic, which is all instrumental.
Right.
Which is amazing. So definitely Google that. Galactic is a funk band out of New Orleans, and they do a great Immigrant Song. But I can't think of any. I really can't.
No, and I think that's what makes Zeppelin, honestly, the best rock band of all time. Just because they are so hard to cover because honestly, think of how many drummers that have, like, somebody that was within Bonham's stratosphere. You have 5 drummers, maybe, really? Like, you're talking like Ginger Baker, Keith Moon, Dave Grohl, like the guy from Slayer, just because I can't believe that guy could actually hit a kick drum that fast. You know what I mean? Like a drummer like that. Then you think of a bass player, like, okay, well, we all know Geddy Lee's a good bass player, but like, can he really do, I mean, he plays the keyboards, but can he play like how John Paul Jones and like actually like orchestrate that stuff? Like Entwistle is a good bass player, but I don't think Entwistle, it's like John Paul Jones is like Entwistle, but with like Pete Townshend's like ambition of like producing stuff. You know what I mean? Like he can do so much more than any other bass player really can do. I mean, even Cliff Burton's bass solo, man. So
well, Luke Boris might track you down and go fighting words after our Quadrophenia episode. He's a big Entwistle fan.
I'm just saying, because like I feel like John Paul Jones can play with Entwistle, but he also can play the keyboards and the organ.
Well, here's and I talk about this in the Quadrophenia episode, is that what makes Keith Moon so great is Entwistle. The two combined. Would Keith Moon have been that great without Entwistle? So,
I don't think so. And John Bonham doesn't need John Paul Jones.
I throw that question to you. Would John Bonham still have been that great without John Paul Jones?
Yes. Well, because they didn't. Yeah, remember, they didn't grow up with each other and play with each other. So, like Entwistle and Moon, like in Townsend and those guys, like they kind of came all together at once. Well, Jimmy Page, like oh, I know Robert Plant, and Robert Plant knows his drummer.
I know some guys,
and I know John Paul Jones from the sessions I do. And then they put them together, and John Paul Jones, like in the book, The Beast, like he's like, honestly, he goes, it's amazing how like I followed him. And it's fucking John Paul Jones, man. Like, it's not like it's a pushover bass player. It's not like a guy you've never heard of. But those guys together.
It's not fair to me to even ask you that because and this is something I have as a lifelong classic rock fan. I have a newfound appreciation for all the bands that we've done on this show. And if you would have asked me before I saw this, Led Zeppelin, Who, great classic rock bands, Pink Floyd, et cetera, they're all classic rock. And even though that they have their own little, niches, but they're all just classic rock to me. I feel differently now. It is, you cannot compare the Who to Led Zeppelin, two completely different streams of.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And just like I'm sure that if someone 10 years from now is saying Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, that's just Seattle music. Whereas that's
right.
and that's the same way I was looking at classic rock. That's just England music from the classic rock era.
Right. Whereas
if you were to dissect them, you can't compare them. Two completely different bands.
Yeah, I mean, like if you think about it, like the Who is like, I would say they're more straight ahead rock and roll than Zeppelin is, because like Zeppelin is, they kind of like created like the metal progressive thing, like Tool covers No Quarter. I mean, and you think about Tool and like how the way those guys play, they are very like, and obviously like Sabbath created like the heavier, they're heavier. They're just like, there's like more, the weight when they play, it just sounds like more, like you feel it more than you would, like the Who is, and trust me, and Bob O'Reilly is great, and I love Quadrophenia, and I love the Who is Next, and all that stuff, but they're not, and they have some heavy bass, but the way that they produce the Zeppelin records, they're just, it feels like, I mean, you think about like Days of Confused, that bass when it's like, and compared to like, a lighter bass.
I really think you hit on something though with the covers, because Black Sabbath, there are a million covers of War Pigs and Paranoid and everything, millions of them. Right. The Who, I mean, hell, the movie Tommy itself, you've got Eric Clapton, you've got Elton John, you've got plenty of
Tina Turner
covering plenty of Who songs. So there's
and Margaret.
There's a lot of Who covers out there, but Led Zeppelin, you really kind of poked me that. I mean, and maybe our users out there.
I have two. I just thought of two. I just thought of the second one besides No Quarter by Tool, which you can only get like on their live disc thing. I don't think it's even on streaming services. You have to look it up. But the other one is this band from England. They were called Electricity. I think that was the name. And they covered Dazed and Confused. But it was like 4 minutes long instead of like the 9 minute. You know what I mean? It was like, it's fast and it's really weird. Besides that, I mean, it's been.
Have you heard
like
Dave Grohl sing Stairway to Heaven from like the Conan show or something?
I did. I did. I always think of Stairway. I always think of Wayne's World, because like that's why Jack Black asked because Zeppelin is so expensive to have like on a movie or anything like that. And when they get the $5,000 and Wayne goes in and he goes to play the guitar and he starts playing and the guy stops him playing. It says, "No Stairway, denied," because they like asked.
Great joke.
Because they actually asked Zeppelin if they could like do it, and they're like, "No way! Like you owe this." And like they're like, "There's a small budget film from like Saturday Night Live," and they're like, "Yeah, no, we don't really give a shit. Like you're not fucking over our music." Yeah, like Queen, which is so funny because like Queen was, still a band longer than Zeppelin was. And I mean, to me though, Zeppelin.
Freddie Mercury tribute concert in 92 or 90. 91, 92. He sang Crazy Little Thing Called Love. Does a good version of it.
Robert Plant. Yeah, well, Robert Plant's got that. He had that whole.
It's a bluesy song. Yeah.
He had like a whole, like almost like an Elvis cover type thing, and then him and Alison Krauss have been doing stuff for years.
They've been on tour for a while.
And that's all. I think he was kind of done with Zeppelin because after his child died, and then.
Well, I think that he doesn't have the voice for it anymore. I think he said that.
Yeah, and he was losing like during the tours and stuff.
And he doesn't want to disgrace the songs. He can't do them justice anymore, so he doesn't want to do them. Which,
and if you can tell from Celebration Day that, I mean, I remember when they were going to play, and the only way you could get to that concert if you weren't like a celebrity was you would win them through like, I want to say like AT&T or like some place that you could win tickets to go to the O2 to see Celebration Day, which was Zeppelin, with Jason
That
Bonham.
was in 2007. I've still got his Wikipedia up here. Yeah.
And like, that's on like all the streaming services and stuff. That's Celebration Day. And it is not Led Zeppelin. And they only have like, 2 live records besides that. And, How the West Was Won is a fantastic live record, but I don't think it's like their best one, but they were anti-tapers.
It's the same is kind of hard to watch at times.
I've seen it like once, and I think I was young when I saw it.
Too artsy for me.
Yeah, and they didn't want to put it out, and the only reason they put it out was Robert Plant broke his leg in a car accident, and while he was rehabbing, they're like, we got to do something, and so they put that out, and people still all went to it and saw it, and I'm like, I don't know if I mean, swing and a miss, but they weren't they would break tapes, yeah, but they were like big anti-tapers, like their manager, like he would go into the crowd and like destroy people's like tape decks and stuff, like, and all that stuff, just to not have them be recorded. And I'm thinking, why would you not like at least pull that off the sound? The sound bar
live sets in Song Remains the Same are great. It's everybody.
Yeah, it's
they've got
else.
These little vignettes of each individual band member
at their houses and stuff.
Sometimes it get a little weird. Like there's a wizard at one point. I don't know, but it's been a while since I.
Right. That's what sucks is like that's what you have for live. Like the Who, obviously, Live at Leeds is one of the greatest live albums of all time, and the fact that they gave they finally put out the expanded version with Tommy live and everything, like, because the first Live at Leeds was just one album and it was like 12 songs or something, but then they finally put the full thing out, and like that's amazing. You have that record. And then Zeppelin, they have his Song Remains the Same that everybody pans because they have them walking around their houses like doing God knows what, but yeah, the live stuff, ridiculous. I mean, you said Gallows Pole, but like besides Immigrant Song, like what? I'm cutting the 3 out that you already were like digging. But like, how about the stuff that's not singles for you? Like, what do you like? If you're like, man, when I hear 3, which some people don't listen to this record, they just pick the ones off. That's why I'm hoping to get some Tangerine streams tomorrow or whenever it comes out.
So my main takeaways from this are always going to be Gallows Pole, Tangerine, That's the Way, and Bron Your Stomp. I think you take out Roy Harper, the second half of this album is just banger after banger to me. I mean, I love it. It's great. shows off the talent of the whole band with different instruments, and obviously Jimmy Page is just perfect form. And then Robert Plant's voice hits these songs with it's almost bluegrass at times.
Yeah.
I could see Old Medicine Show maybe covering some of these songs.
Yeah. Didn't they have like something back out years ago? It was like it was one of the first like bluegrass like covers one, and I thought it was Zeppelin, or it was the Beatles and then the Zeppelin.
I loved it.
And it was like bluegrass covers of them. I remember something like that they came out with and I don't know if it was these songs.
I know there's a band called Steven Seagulls that does that, bluegrass versions of old rock tunes, like they did November Rain and stuff. But and they do a good version of Thunderstruck, which is washboard and stuff.
Oh yeah, you gotta love that. You gotta love them. Thunderstruck covers are not a lot of AC/DC covers, but then again, there's not a lot. As you thought, oh, hey, there's only one Bon Scott, and then we're going to find a guy who actually put his vocal cords into a blender
right.
and decided to sing at the same time.
When you get to me, Friends, Celebration Day, okay, all right, not skippable, but they're just kind of there.
And what's crazy is that Celebration Day is like a staple for their live shows after this comes out, and they name that live record Celebration Day, which I'm with you. Like those two songs, I'm like, because it's maybe the way they sequence it, the pull people back down.
Between Immigrant Song and Since I've Been Loving You. And, those are two heavy hitters.
Right.
They really are. So you got those two heavy hitters, and then Out of the Tiles, great song. We talked about that briefly. And it's good classic Zeppelin to me.
Yeah.
It fills that void. But then from Gallows Pole all the way to Brawn Your Stomp, beautiful.
That's why I've always been a fan of the second half. I love Immigrant Song because like Immigrant Song doesn't even seem like it should be on this record.
You're right, it doesn't.
It makes no sense. Like it should be on 2 or 4. Like it could go right next to Black Dog, and you'd be like, it probably is on like a greatest hits or like a compilation from theirs. It's probably like Black Dog or Immigrant Song, Black Dog, and then Stairway to Heaven. Like that's just how you could see like that compilation could put together. I'm still you just trade out Hats Off for Hey What Can I Do, and I think you got, which is like how many people have probably said something on your show that about one of their favorite records, and they're like, if this song wasn't on here.
Absolutely. There's almost always one track that you're just kind of like, it was a weird decision. Why did they put it here? Why did they include it? Why didn't they just slice off that one and then leave it as is?
Yeah. And I guess that would be Rats on Versus, but I like Rats. So like there's to me like Versus. That's why Versus was like the first one I picked.
Well, like the Common album, B, a great like 10 tracks of beautiful poetry, and then that 11th track is the generic. Let's get all my rapper friends to just spout gibberish for a generic beat, and we'll put a track on it. And you take that off, it's a near perfect hip hop album.
Yeah, and I will say, like, of all my like top 5 favorite records of all time, 2 of them are legit. Like, there's not a song I would take off, and we haven't talked about either one of them. But like Revolver by the Beatles, like there's not a song I would take off, and there's not a song I would move. Nothing. And then Ziggy Stardust and Spiders from Mars by David Bowie. There's not a song that I go, oh, I got it. Like, whatever. Like, Versus is great. I love Rats, but like people are probably like, Rats is terrible, And then this is Hats Off to Roy Harper. And then my 5th record, OK Computer, it's Filter Happier, which is just like him messing around like an old MacBook, like typing out like better health techniques. That's all it is. And so it's super annoying, but it's a great record. And You would always think like, oh man, if it's your favorite record, it has to be flawless.
No, it doesn't have to be flawless.
But I don't think it does. Well,
And this is a shout out to my critic out there, who, if I really cared, I would remember his name. Sorry out there. But I mentioned on my Animals episode that Metal is a 75% great album, but Seamus and Pillow of Winds are unlistenable. They're just not good songs.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool that he had the dog howl because of playing the blues.
My one critic out there said that I'm not a real Pink Floyd fan because I don't like Pillow of Winds. To each his own opinion there. Okay, sure.
You know what he should have said? If you're not a real Pink Floyd fan, all the Pink Floyd fans talk about how great Final Cut is, and it's fucking garbage. It's a bad Roger Waters solo record. That's what it is.
And there's maybe 2 tracks off that album that work in the movie of The Wall, like as little supplements.
Yeah, because isn't there stuff?
They're throwaway tracks from The Wall make up half that album.
And those are fine. Like, I'm not mad at that because watching the movie The Wall, like, I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, I remember watching it the first time. I'm like, well, this isn't on that.
Like when the Tigers broke free and things like that. I mean,
that's a good song, but like the rest is fucking shit. And I hate those people that are like, oh, well, that's the one I like. And yet I'm picking like Led Zeppelin's like 7th best album up to most people. So I'm like,
I was very happy you did because I personally hold Led Zeppelin III, up on that high pedestal for Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin II, great. Led Zeppelin IV, amazing. But and I'm going to say it, overplayed sometimes. They are. Always.
Yeah, it's like, well, because I mean, if you take a poll of 100 people on the street and like, hey, do you know who Led Zeppelin is? If they say, yeah, what's the name of Led Zeppelin song? No one's going to go, Since I've Been Loving You, Out on the Tiles. They're going to say Stairway to Heaven, man. Like, they would say that one from Thor, the Thor movie. Well, I know that's his Led Zeppelin song, right?
Well, I mean,
you know what I mean?
It's good album.
Yeah, I mean, there's no anger about it. It's just, it's funny just how, and that's why I was saying like Pearl Jam, like all like, a real fan of fucking don't like No Code. Like when No Code came out, I was like, this is fucking terrible. And I appreciated it, but like people now are like, No Code's their best record. I'm like, there's no way that it is. It's not even possible. Like,
there's nothing wrong with being critical of your favorite band. Nothing wrong with that.
No. And they were, trust me, the stuff that came, I mean, Jesus Christ. I was talking to Danny about this the other day. Pearl Jam's been a band since 1990. Yeah. It's 2022. So it's 32 years. So if Led Zeppelin, say if John Bonham never died, their last record would have been in 2010. No, sorry, 2000. That would have been their last record because they would have been a band for 30 years.
There's a lot of bands that are definitely held in higher esteem because they either broke up or they lost a member of the band, and because they did not keep going, they're. And I admittedly have not listened to Pearl Jam as far as their last, I don't know, 60.
Oh no,
last albums I don't really know, in detail. But everyone from the Beatles to Pink Floyd to all those classic groups, had they kept going, I'm sure they would have put out some duds. Every single one can't be perfect.
No, I mean, all you had to do is look at Rolling Stones. Like, I'm not a huge Rolling Stones. I like the Rolling Stones.
Amazing.
I love
first time we've mentioned it in this conversation.
And I love Beggars Boutique, and I love
Sticky Fingers, great album. And,
Sticky Fingers. But, like, think about when, like, their 80s and 90s. And you know what I mean? Like, but these guys, like, how many songs do you expect to write? Like, not everybody can be Bob Dylan. Like, Bob Dylan was, like, gigantic in the 60s. And then pretty big in the 70s. And then disappeared in the 80s. And then the mid to late 90s had a huge resurgence. Like, the guy won Grammys again. And he's still playing. He's, like 100 years old. And it's cool. But the guys, look how many songs the guy wrote. I'm not saying I want to see him. I love Bob Dylan. I mean, you want to talk about?
He was on our Legends list, and we went and saw him. He started singing his new stuff. He mumbled for 2 hours. No one understood a damn word he was saying, and I felt it was one of those. I almost felt bad for him. I did because people were literally yelling, play Maggie's Farm and stuff, and Shelter from the Storm. But he didn't care, didn't hear, and I don't know. It just wasn't a great show.
There's only so Dylan has these bootlegs out. If you go, I think on any of the streaming services, they have them. They're bootlegs, or they're bootleg. I think 6 or 7 is when he's playing with the Rolling Thunder Review. That's the Bob Dylan I'd want to see. Just that one. That's legit, and then maybe the concert, the tour before that. I'm talking 60. I'm talking about 69 and 76, and that's it. And after that or before,
I want to dive into the bootleg tapes from the recordings he did with the band out of the old Pink House, and I don't know if they ever came out with that box set or not.
They did. Well, it's out there on the streaming services because they had Bob come out and I think he gave him the thumbs up.
I need to dive into that because that's the Bob Dylan I like, playing with those guys and just a bunch of guys in the house jamming.
And that's right before Rolling Thunder Review. Rolling Thunder Review is harder. He rocks. He is electrified and he's kicking out the jams. And that might even be the band behind him at that time. I honestly can't remember the timeline how they were his backing band, and when he was in Woodstock and got the motorcycle accident, and the guys from the band were up there with him playing and all this shit. And yeah, because the Basement Tapes is out. It's called the Basement Tapes. That's out. That is fucking. It's every year or two I'll get really big back into Bob Dylan, and that's all I'll listen to for a month or two straight. And then I'm I'm going to listen to the stuff from the 80s. I'm sure I'll like it this time, and I don't. Because he went through he found God again, but I'm saying he found God. His name is Robert Zimmerman. He's a Jewish man from Minnesota who found Jesus and made 3 or 4 Christian records in the late 70s, early 80s. And Slow Train Comin' is if you got to look at the album cover, it's a train with a cross on it and stuff.
Yeah, I just pulled up his Wikipedia, and one of the subcategories is Christian period.
Mm-hmm. Which is funny because it's his name's Robert Zimmerman. He's a 100% Jewish man from Minnesota. Yeah, those are. Go through some Dylan stuff. I don't know. I got really big into Dylan in college, and then right. I
started getting into Bob Dylan after I really got into the Traveling Wilburys. That was my kind of intro to him.
Oh yeah, that was my fucking old man's jam. He used to play Wilbury Twist all the time,
and that's not one of their best songs.
No, but he just thought it because my dad really loves the goofy stuff like that. And he loved. That's why I love that he loves the Traveling Wilburys, loves them. And then I go, well, I would be like, hey, Alexa, play Tom Petty. He goes, oh, Tom Petty, that guy's a piece of shit. My dad doesn't like Tom Petty. And then I'm like, what about Bob Dylan? And he goes, I don't like Bob Dylan either. I'm like, what about Roy Orbison? He's like, some of his songs are okay. I'm like, so that's 3/5 of the band that you like? And he's like, yeah. He goes, but I mean, George Harrison's in it, and he's a Beatle.
Does he like ELO?
He does like ELO. But he likes my dad.
So he's a big Jeff Lynne fan then. Jeff Lynne is all over all that.
My dad loves Leon Russell. And he just likes those dingy guy. He used to have Zappa tapes and stuff. And I'm like, Frank Zappa, a lot of his stuff is unlistenable. And I like weird stuff. But some of that stuff is just garbage. And I love some of, and then the one day, and this is funny, this will have nothing to do with Led Zeppelin, but my dad, I went down through his vinyl stuff, and I'm like, how many different greatest hits of Bread could you have?
Oh, the best of Bread.
And he's like, what do you mean? I go, there's 3 like best of Breads down there, and I go, I don't know what the fuck's going on with that shit.
So we talk about that in our classic rock roundtable. They gave that away. With free magazines, they gave that away in the 70s. Best of Bread.
That's probably why he has multiple of them. And so my dad hates Rush, hates Geddy Lee, voice, everything. I remember when I was a kid, the first time I heard Tom Sawyer, and I was like, oh, who's this lady singing? Like, it's pretty good. Is this Heart? And so it's so funny because I remember he was like, Rush is terrible. And then this was before his apparent hatred of Tom Petty, which people still get loans from him if this is actually kept in. He's a good man. He's made some poor choices in his life, especially when it comes to Tom Petty. But he goes, I was in the shower at their house one day, and all of a sudden I could hear my dad just go, Alexa, play Best of Bread. Like, because he knew I couldn't get out. I couldn't get out of the house. And I guess him and I were like arguing about Bread again for like the 20th time. My wife's always like, fucking Bread. Like, why do you and your dad fight about Bread? I'm like, I don't know. I'm so mad about them and Poco. Like,
hey, what's wrong with Poco?
Oh, come on. It's like the wimpiest Eagles songs that they like made even wimpier.
Going through Poco was like a rite of passage to get to the Eagles.
Oh no! There's just the Eagles. There's no Poco.
it's like the minor league of the Eagles.
There's no Loggins and Messina that we have to listen to all day either. Like my dad, like I couldn't believe it, and I was like,
Poco's up there with the Flying Burrito Brothers. I mean, it's.
Well, no, let's not. Like the Flying Burrito Brothers has, Graham Parsons. Like those first couple records with Graham Parsons, he was actually the guy who got the Rolling Stones into like Honky Tonk Woman and like kind of created like alt country, and he was in the Flying Burrito Brothers, and the Byrds, Mr. Tambourine Man like version that they do is like very like alt country, but no, I can't about Bread and the old man. And so what I did, I knew he was coming back and I was leaving, and I left and I go, Alexa, play Rush's greatest hits like on repeat for like 5 hours or something. And it like he came home and I got a text. He goes, well played, son. Well played. It's like he just hates, and my mom hates both of them. She's like, fucking both these bands sucks. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, by the way, my mom, she's a good sport about she goes, I'm not even from New York, Michael. I'm not a New York woman from that's Jewish. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't sound
amongst
like
yourselves.
Yeah, I was like, "Are you sure you're not? You're feeling a little verklempt?" She's like, "Michael, seriously." I was like, "You're more Jewish than I am." I'm like, there's a whole other story that my great great grandfather was a stagecoach driver in the 1800s, and he was Jewish, and he met a Catholic woman from Spring Valley and married her, and blah blah blah. Well, they had like a whole like burial of him because he was dead to them because he married a Catholic girl and he was Jewish. And I was like, so technically I'm a 16th and my mom would be like an 8th. And like, I was like, I don't think anybody turned an 8th down before, Mom. And she's like, shut up. You quit talking drug references. I was like, what? Fuck you. I was like, that's a good joke.
Do you ever watch Aqua Teen Hunger Force?
Oh, I used to watch that in college all the time.
Every time someone mentions Geddy Lee, I think of Aqua Teens. And did you see the episode with Zach Wilde in it?
Yes.
At the end of the episode, Shake. He's like, wait. Shake. He's like, why is it snowing? What's that noise? Is those jingle bells? It's like, oh shit, it's Geddy Lee. I owe him money. And Geddy Lee comes riding in on like a big bass guitar pulled by sleigh bells or something. I don't know. It's hilarious.
It's so nonsensical. Like there's no way that I don't hear a Foreigner song and not think of the Foreigner belt.
Yep.
with the Moonanites. The Moonanites come down. What's wrong, Fry Man?
You must have double vision.
Double vision. Are you hot-blooded? I just, the way they wrote that, and that's only 15 minutes.
When I do go to the office, I actually drive home past Cartoon Network in the William Street area.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I see it. It's right there. I mean, it just looks like a cool. It looks very MailChimpy to where I work. It looks very neat. But I mean, William Street, it's right there.
I think I have the entire series on DVD because I was just a huge. I thought, and I didn't even smoke weed in college, man. Like I just thought it was
same here. I thought it was the funniest thing. It was great.
I will say this though, like. Having found gummies, it does make it really funny. Or like it's funnier than you even remember. You're like, wait, I know this is supposed to be stupid, but this seems way funnier than it was.
I mean, granted, I watched it extremely drunk. I mean, there was always something to put on when you're drinking, and it's say late at night, Saturdays, turn it on. Then you got Meatwad. Like you can't just tell me I'm drunk.
Yeah,
that's not a decision for you to make.
Carl was the best, the next door neighbor, Carl. Hey, meat guy. Hey, fry man. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about this. Go Jets. And then after that, I think usually it was Space Coast, Coast to Coast.
Yeah.
That's a trippy show too. They used to have humans on there and then kick them off. Oh, what a great fucking show! Old school Cartoon Network, like that's.
I think they're on HBO Max right now.
But I saw that and I was playing this. I'm like,
I started.
You want to watch the entire series of Aqua Teen? It will take us 2 hours.
Yeah,
every episode's like 10 minutes. The Moonanites were always the best. Like they would like their guns when the way they would talk.
They are
right, man.
That graffiti, you'll see the Moonanites all over Iraq. You never see it in any of the news clippings or whatever, but soldiers drawing the Moonanites all over the place.
The Moonanites were the best. Hey,
they're also super easy to draw. So
and we could jump really high. They were 2-dimensional. They were like they were like Atari like drawings compared to like Nintendo drawings. Like, it was like a step below.
Yeah. Move on to our next little segment here. So Led Zeppelin III made your top spot for this particular episode. I'm going to ask you about your short list, but I'm going to challenge you on the spot here. Classic rock short list.
All right. Classic rock.
What you could have brought to the table if 3 to 5, what you could have brought to the table instead of Led Zeppelin 3.
100% Revolver by the Beatles. I know a lot of people, it's like Sgt. Pepper's or Abbey Road or Let It Be, but Revolver.
I'm an Abbey Road guy.
Yeah, and I love Revolver because it's like the first time they kind of gets like psychedelic with
it's the change. Yeah, it's that shift.
Yeah. I can't remember. I think it's a George Harrison song that's on there. I legit got to look it up because it's going to drive me nuts if I don't say it. Here, There, and Everywhere. And then, Tomorrow Never Knows ends the record, which is like super psychedelic and just one of my favorite songs. But it also has Taxman.
And Your Bird Can Sing is one of my favorite Beatles tunes, just as a solo track.
And I will say, you can probably keep this part in, but like Eleanor Rigby is like my mom's favorite Beatles song and Marissa's favorite Beatles song. And there's not one rock instrument on that song. It's all orchestra.
I'm going to throw you a suggestion. Soul Live. Look up Soul Live on YouTube and their version of Eleanor Rigby. It's a medley of nice. Eleanor Rigby and She's So Heavy.
Oh yeah, I like that. It's good.
And it's all instrumental. It's a blues band out of New York. It's great. Just check that out.
That is a good like Good Day Sunshine. There now I'm looking at it and I shouldn't look at it. And then David Bowie's, and then we talked about it before, like David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust and the Spider from Mars. That is, to me, like one of just the best records that legit ever came out. There's not a bad track on the whole thing. Most people, remember Ziggy Stardust, and then there's 5 years, and then there's, I think half the record is, singles. To me,
I know it got a boost after Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, because of Moon Age Daydream.
Moon Age Daydream and Starman. Well, Starman, I'm surprised is not on there too.
Starman's a classic, yeah.
Well, like Suffragette City, like Rock and Roll Suicide, like these are great records. And like you're making me look at classic rock, so like I 100% pulled up my spreadsheet. So don't you worry.
I knew they'd come out.
Because I'm like, wait, hold on, because I don't want to fucking miss anything. I'm real pissed if I do. And like obviously, like Let It Be, like I'm looking at 70s right now. If I'm just gonna like say 70s, which like Who's Next? Like it's that's Bob O'Reilly. That's Who's Next. That's Won't Get Fooled Again. That's like I know people love Tommy in Quadrophenia, and Quadrophenia is an awesome record. But Who's Next has Bob O'Reilly, and that's not even played with a guitar. The guy just typed some stuff in and made it. And then honestly, there's Rubber Soul shit, and then there's Dylan Bringing Nell Back Home, Blonde on Blonde. Sorry, Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced? Obviously, I love Wish You Were Here, which I would say is probably my favorite Floyd record is Wish You Were Here. So that's always up there as like a huge record to me. But yeah, I'm sticking like pure classic rock. Like to me, like my 5 classic rock bands, I would say, like if I'm going to go to and listen to them all the time, it's always the Beatles, Zeppelin, The Who, Floyd, and then Dylan. Those are like my 5. Like obviously I'm missing Bowie and the Beach Boys.
Yeah, that's a hard one to narrow down to 5.
Right. And then but then honestly, one of my favorite classic rock songs of all time is like Crosby, Stills and Nash, like Wooden Ships.
Wooden Ships is great.
Like White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane. Like there's so many, and we were lucky, I guess, that our parents, were like the first generation of like people that listened to rock and roll, like, and didn't think it was weird. There's probably like people in like their 70s that are probably like, rock and roll was kind of, different, and we really didn't care for it. We really like a lot of like Elvis, and then when I mean like rock and roll, I mean like 60s and 70s rock and roll, like the classic rock. Like Elvis is not played on classic rock station, And
it's funny is Luke and I talk about this on the Quadrophenia episode, which hasn't come out yet, and it's weird because growing up, it was classic rock the way we perceived it. Whether it's Elvis, Buddy Holly, all the way through the late 70s. That was just old school rock, classic rock. So many different genres, all encompassed into just classic rock. And then you watch Quadrophenia or listen to Quadrophenia, and there's this big rivalry between the mods and the rockers. Whereas the rockers are, rockers. They like the R&B heavy hard rock stuff. And then the mods are more for the Who or Rolling Stones style stuff, or the Kinks. And they were going at it. I mean, they hate each other because you just in a Biggie Tupac sort of way.
Yeah.
It was, whereas we grew up thinking that's just all classic rock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always thought that, like, that was one of the things I always talked to my dad. I was like, okay, so all this music came out. And I was like, what did you do? I was like, I couldn't imagine like just hearing it for the first time because like you've never heard anything like it. When we heard it, like for years of our lives, it was background music that we didn't even recognize because we were too young to figure it out. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like from the ages of birth to, let's say, 6 or 7, you know, like you heard it, but like it was like background noise music to you. And then you're like, oh, this is music, but then there's also other music that's out now, but like this is really good stuff. Like I can't imagine like putting the needle down and hearing like the beginning of Dark Side of the Moon, you know, like, and nothing else has come out like that. Or, you know, like Black Sabbath, like Paranoid, like the first time that got put down, like just to hear that something that's so different that you never heard. Like you had Elvis, and then obviously like the Beatles, but then the Beatles even changed, you know, it's like, it's fucking crazy to like imagine like that.
Yes. But on the flip side, we didn't get, let's say this. We did live through the era of like, you know, Van Halen 1984 came out in 1984. You know, that's
right.
That was still that we were too young to notice it, but it was still in our era. But when you look at high school, we got to live through our own version of that with Nevermind, with 10 and Verses, OK Computer. You know, we got to put those CDs on and live our own version of classic albums, hearing them for the first time.
I would say that my only thing is, and I love Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and all those guys, all those bands that we listen to. Those guys were so heavily influenced by the bands that our parents like heard for the first time.
Yeah.
Like, and nobody before that, like there's nobody 20 years before, you know, Zeppelin I. Like in 1949, there's nobody with an electric guitar.
Yeah, but there were those blues artists that they all pulled from.
But at that time, there's no
proper recordings. Yeah.
Right. And there's no way to hear it. Like you think about like
Led Zeppelin's not pulling from Benny Goodman's, 1940 orchestra.
Like, let's say something as simple as like, I don't know, like just Crosby, Stills and Nash and like Neil Young. Like there's been folk singers, right? And so like that sound kind of pulls the whole way through from Peter, Paul and Mary and like the 50s and 60s. And then like, there's always like a guitar player and a singer type thing. And that kind of pulls all the way through. That's something they've heard. But then it's like, let's say like Sgt. Pepper's, like there's nothing that came out before that really, or like when Jimi Hendrix went on stage and did something with an electric guitar, you can go now and like, yeah. And I get, and I understand like, you know, like Nirvana, and it's almost like it's like the greatest generation. I feel like that was the greatest generation. I'm going with it. And trust me, Steve, like, I mean, obviously, like I listen to new music all the time, but I can't imagine what it would be like to hear. I feel like it's almost like we're like blessed and we're cursed because we got to hear all this stuff plus the stuff that happened in the 90s. And now like it makes you almost like, the shit that comes out now, you're like...
That's exactly how I feel.
Look, I want to like it, and I do. There's a lot of stuff I do like. And then I look at it, and like I want to teach my niece and nephew like about, hey, you got to listen to this. And, you know, Ray, you know, listens to the 90s stuff all the time. And they're like, they asked me, they're like, oh, Uncle Michael, do you know this band? I'm like, yeah, fucking of course I do. How would I not know it? I was like, I'm pretty sure I told your dad about him and your mom. Like, so I used to drive him to school, you know, like, but I think like, especially when we were in high school, like Days of Confused came out. And like the 70s culture was really big when we were in high school. You know, like people really like Aerosmith came back and like
for better or for worse. Yeah.
The Eagles and Fleetwood Mac. You know what I mean? Like all these bands like came back that were like big 70s staples. Like I remember when like Hell Freezes Over came out, I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like I don't even know. Those guys didn't make, maybe they just made shit records like Bob Dylan did like in the 80s. You know what I mean?
Come through the camera and strangle you.
No, but you know what I'm saying? Like, why did it freeze over that these guys aren't playing with each other? And then they had a resurgence. I'm confused because like Zeppelin, or not Zeppelin, but like the Eagles are always in my mind because they were always there. Like it wasn't like oh man, I've been waiting 10 years for a new Eagles record. Like, we fucking had all the Eagles and we had all Zeppelin. And in our minds, like, everybody was either dead or they just didn't give a fuck anymore. You know, like, nobody was like, oh, you know, like the new Rolling Stones record's out. Like, nobody fucking cared. Like, and then Aerosmith came back. And then, you know what I mean? Like, and then when I remember the first time I heard Aerosmith, I was like, oh, fuck, that's pretty cool. And they were like, oh, you got to hear this. And then they had the Unplugged, and I'm like, what are these fucking songs? And they were from like 25 years ago. And I was like, holy shit. And then the Who kept going, you know, but did they?
Everything has its 20 to 30 year nostalgia, you know, trip up. You know, that's kind of the cycle.
How much?
They're coming out with a 90s show now. I mean.
Right. And that was 30 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, when we were in high school, we were closer to the 70s and Led Zeppelin music than we are to our high school now. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Like,
the 70s stuff was like, I remember my mom was like, oh, we're having hippie day. This is how we used to like dress like this in this, or 70s day. One of the homecomings. They're like, this is how we used to dress. And I'm like, oh, this is so stupid. And then like, I look at these kids now.
And what kind of blew my mind today, I was just kind of, you know, looking through the Led Zeppelin history, and I didn't realize In Through the Outdoor came out in 79.
Yeah. And then Coda.
I mean, shit, a year before I was born. I mean, I didn't realize it was that close.
Steve, when's your birthday?
April.
Okay, so we were both alive. John Bonham and John Lennon were still alive when we were born. I always tell my wife that. I was like, I was in the same partial of time as John Bonham and John Lennon.
Well, we need to move on to wrapping this up because it's after midnight here.
Yeah.
So before we wrap this up, please tell our listeners if you're working on anything, if you can find you anywhere, or anything you would like to pitch or talk about.
You can find me at the social medias that I don't check hardly ever. I pretty much just love and thumbs up Music Rewind. That's pretty much what I go on social media for anymore.
That is a good social media strategy. I approve.
Yeah, I will give a shout out again to the Beguile Brewing Company on Collier Street in Avenue in Chicago. Our neighbors, fantastic beer, and just enjoy listening to the new records that I get to hear, or stuff I haven't heard in a while from this podcast. It's great, and maybe by the time this one airs, I will actually be on the Soundtrack Your Life podcast with my cousin Danny, doing singles, and that was I think a guy that was on this season.
Ryan Pack does Soundtrack Your Life.
Yeah, and reached out to him. And
episode. We're
hoping to record it in the next couple weeks. So depending on when this comes out, Soundtrack Your Life, check it out. It's good, and because especially 90s soundtracks are the best.
Excellent. Well, Mike, I'd like to thank you for your time today. It was a pleasure to sit and talk with you about Led Zeppelin III.
All right, man. Yeah, get to bed. I'm with you. I get to work from home tomorrow. I'm pretty excited. The last 3 days I've been up at 6 o'clock, and
yeah, I wouldn't be podcasting at midnight if I didn't have to work from home. So that's nice. Thank you for listening to Music Rewind, a podcast from the Sidereal Media. Oh, man, I am tired. Thank you for listening to Music Rewind, a podcast from the Sidereal Media Group. As I always say, listen to the full album. Until next time.
Just not the last song.
Yeah, just
fuck that Roy Harper.
Hats off to Roy Harper.
Hats off my balls.
A podcast from the Sidereal Media Group. Back to you, anchors.